Hello, my name is Melvin James. In this audio video, I will be reading a few pages from my epic literary fiction novel, Tares Among the Wheat. As I narrate, I will show a progression of my own pencil sketching of the scene related to the part of the story I am reading. Now I begin reading from Volume 2, from within Chapter 11, titled Homecoming. Tares Among the Wheat by Melvin James. In the autumn of '49, Hank received notice to report to Oklahoma City for testing and physical examination pending military draft. He was subsequently found unquestionably sound and fit to serve as war fodder. As soon as Hank was classified 1A for draft, Doreen, Lex, and Hank anticipated his imminent draft notice. With that event looming, Doreen tried extra hard to prepare Thanksgiving dinner. She wanted the meal to be especially enjoyable for the lonely three of them. Despite Doreen's heart-devoted efforts, the meal and the mood were disappointing. The weather was dreary, the budget was meager, the house was closed in, dark and cold, and she overcooked the modest main dish of chicken. Doreen tried to keep a pleasant dinner conversation, and Hank tried to reciprocate and to draw Lex into the talk. Invariably, however, an odd or vulgar or mean comment by Lex or a cold shrug doused each offered topic, like pissing on a campfire before the kindling catches. As Christmas time neared, wanting of promise, Doreen could no longer ignore her despair, or pretend good times might soon return. She was on the verge of another winter, struggling to maintain meager household budgets and making decisions among keeping the house from freezing and keeping food on the table. She had spent much of the previous winter coaching Hank to pass his tests to obtain a general education degree, and that had given her a sense of duty with a goal. She was now without any goals, and worse, she was reluctant to even contemplate any new interest. One morning Doreen took a blanket under her arm and ventured into the mansion's chilly study. While the early December day warmed to nearly 60 degrees outdoors, the unheated study was still as cold as the early morning, always lagging several hours' delay for warmth to creep through the walls toward whichever zone was cooler, indoors or out. Venturing away from the gloomy core of the closed-off house and entering any of the grand exterior rooms was uplifting for Doreen. Sometimes, even when the upstairs was freezing cold, Doreen would go there just to get a change of scenery and a chance to trigger memories of happier times, romantic times, times when she was a young woman, strong and optimistic. But she had to be careful where she allowed her memories to take her, for much of her past remained torturous to recall. Thus Doreen tried to concentrate on her most enjoyable memories, avoiding those of maddening regret. Hank was in the barn that December morning, doing chores, cleaning the horse's stall, repairing and oiling the leather tack, and, as he had told Doreen of his plans, fixing broken or dull tools. Lex had driven away in the old black Ford sedan, one of Sonny Lee's two run-down automobiles. He was off to town to get a few things that Doreen had carefully listed on an index card, including the cost of each item. The list totaled $8.50 without sales tax. She had given Lex a $10 bill paper-clipped to the list. Doreen directed Lex to buy as much gasoline for the car as the grocer provided him as change from the $10 bill. She estimated that amount would buy almost 5 gallons of gasoline. The flash of flickering sunlight was sudden. With the opening in the overcast clouds, Doreen caught the glimmer from the corner of her eye. Something foreign was approaching Sonny Lee's courtyard. Turning to look straight on, she toyed with the notion of a gallant knight in flashing armor, galloping boldly and ostentatiously into her castle courtyard to rescue her, a helpless maiden locked in a dismal prison. She imagined to herself so, as much realistically as whimsically. Indeed, she had long felt helpless and trapped. As soon as Lex left for town that morning, Doreen had taken a soft blanket and her second cup of coffee into the study. She had been there for almost 2 hours, dozing, thinking, remembering, and crying, before the sun broke out of the clouds and glistened through the huge window with blinding brilliance. It seemed an omen, an act of God, something to cheer her. It was in that burst of light that the sunny, shiny, bodacious red car charged into the courtyard. The real object was no less thrilling than her first perception and imagery. It appeared to be a fanciful knight, mounted on his steed, both shrouded in shining red armor. Someone bold and flamboyant had come to visit the McClarys and to bring cheer, perhaps wealth, or anything would do to break this depressing mood. She thought half flippantly and half cynically. Doreen was certain, whomever the visitor, this was an event that would catapult her out of her doldrums and back into meaningful life. She was at the edge of the precipice, separating mortal life from heaven's eternity on the other side, with hell's doom in the depths below. Doreen felt that something had to happen to her at this precipitous point in her life, and this flash of color and light in the midst of a dull gray winter was surely the harbinger. She jumped to her feet, slipped on her shoes, and stepped up to the big window. The automobile was the prettiest carriage she had ever seen. It was a convertible with pristine white canvas top and white sidewall tires. All else, other than gleaming chrome, was a deep glossy red. The car reminded her of the ripe red delicious apples dipped in candy icing as peddled at the county fair. When a tall, handsome stranger emerged from the car and looked toward the house, Doreen dashed into the hall, quickly pulled on a coat, and rushed out to greet the visitor. "Hello, you must be Doreen. I am Virgil Bell, sales manager of the Cushenberry Automobile Dealership." "How do you do? Yes, I am Doreen McClary. What can I do for you, Mr. Bell?" Just then Lex drove up in the noisy old black Ford. While Doreen was a bit disappointed for her husband's entrance, spoiling her notions of playful romantic flirtation with a stranger, she was relieved to see that Lex had finally returned home. She would not have to ask Hank to take the old quarter-ton pickup truck, barely operable and greatly unreliable, to go out on yet another search and rescue mission to find Lex. Doreen had been determined to gradually increase Lex's responsibilities and to increase her expectations of him as well, even if that development was as tedious as making limited shopping assignments. It was not rewarding for Doreen, trying to develop her husband to be responsible, much in a manner as she imagined it would be for mothering an obstinate pre-adolescent. She had less confidence in Lex now than she had in Hank as he developed through his early teens. As the Ford's worn brake shoes screeched, steel skidding against steel, Lex brought the car to a dust-flaring halt, jumped out, and ran up to Doreen and Mr. Bell as might an excited child. "Did he tell you, Doreen? This is your car. It's brand spanking new, and it's your car. I bought it for you, and I paid cash for it. It's your Christmas present, Doreen, and your birthday present, too, for all the birthdays I forgot." Doreen was filled with confused emotion. "Oh, Lex, darling, it's beautiful, but we cannot afford it. Have you lost? Doreen, it's my surprise, especially for you. You see, I had all these oil royalties way up in Flint County, and I had all but forgotten about them. I don't know how I managed to keep them from the Mocorp holdings, but somehow they were overlooked and not specified. And they are still mine, or ours. I planned all this for you, Dory. I watched the royalty checks add up for most of a year to nearly $3,000. I special ordered this car for you, all the way from Lansing, Michigan. Lex unabashedly began to sing lines from an old song, holding Doreen's hands and swaying like a child. Come away with me, Lucille, in my merry Oldsmobile. Down the road of life we'll fly, automobubling you and I. Lex's voice trailed off, and he turned away from Doreen to face the new car. Damn, this car can run. It goes twice as fast as the Stutz Bearcat, and it gets up to that speed in half the time. If you drive this car into a bridge at full speed, Dory, you will succeed in killing yourself and anyone with you, tucked in your womb or sitting in the seat beside you. Hell's bells, I might take this doll to the stock car races and win myself a trophy. The car salesman had lost his smile. He turned and walked toward the Ford, shouting back over his shoulder, I will drive your Ford back to the shop and have the brakes replaced, Mr. McClary, as we discussed. Then you can decide if you want to trade it in on another car, sell it, or just keep it. You folks have a good day. Neither Lex nor Doreen paid much attention to the salesman's words or the noisy Ford driving away. Doreen was simultaneously pleased, elated, disappointed, hurt, and angry. She elevated her voice, hoping the volume would get through to Lex. He was bent at the waist, leaning head and shoulders under the car's hood, appearing much like a man being eaten by a giant, fat red toad. For heaven's sake, Lexington, I've been scrimping for all of the months, and you have been hoarding the money. We're going to take this car back right now. Then I'm going to make sure you have no ability to frivolously spend any more money than I give to you. I thought Arnold and I had an understanding. How did you convince Arnold to give you so much money for something so extravagant? Do I need to keep you chained to a radiator in the house? Lex finally withdrew his head from the engine compartment and looked back toward Doreen. Hell, woman, it's my money and I can spend it any way I want. Besides, I put this money in another bank, and neither you nor any of your lovers, Blavin, Duncan, and heaven only knows who else you bed, will ever find my special accounts. Lex had moved away from the car and was standing next to Doreen when he finished talking. The man facing her seemed a complete stranger, red-faced and beyond angry, seeming as foreign and mean as a bloodthirsting barbarian. The strange man concentrated a hard stare into her eyes. Doreen was stunned and overwhelmed with torrents of feelings, too many to separate, identify, and confront. She hadn't noticed the man's hands until they had encircled her neck and clasped her throat. Immediately she felt blood pressuring, filling her choked head. She felt an enormous dull pain in her throat, the urge to shout, to swallow, to breathe, but she could not. Her hands were tugging at his wrist, but her arms quickly grew weak. Doreen felt as if her body would have wilted to the ground but for the man suspending her by the neck. The world she viewed through watery eyes began turning dark. She was only faintly glimpsed what appeared as a dove in flight behind Lex. It flew so near to him that its wings stroked his face. Doreen's oxygen-starved brain imagined an angel had come to save her or to accompany her passing. Then, like being covered with a thick blanket blocking light, sound, and air to breathe, her cognitive and sensory existence ended in black nothingness. This has been a brief reading from my literary fiction novel, Tares Among the Wheat. This reading was from the second of 2 volumes of that epic novel. My narration was of the primary frame story. The characters Doreen and Lexington are the purported maternal grandparents of Amelia Mead, the protagonist of the main framing story. I will be reading other randomly selected passages from my novel from time to time. Tares Among the Wheat is available from all major online booksellers in hardcover, paperback, or ebook formats. Follow me on Twitter or friend me on Facebook. This is H. Melvin James bidding you farewell.